Hello BookTube. It is 2 weeks until 2026 is upon us, and with the new year comes plenty of exciting new book releases. Today I wanted to sit down and film a video to talk about some of the books that I'm most excited about that are coming out next year. There's a decent range of genres on this list, I would say, but it is a bit dominated by fantasy and romance because those are the areas of literature I'm enjoying reading right now. But we do also have some horror, some non-fiction, some historical, some literary fiction. So there is a decent mix of things on this list. Some of my favourite authors have new releases coming out this coming year. So I'm really looking forward to 2026. I think it's going to be a promising year for publishing. Kicking off with January, there is one book that is coming out in January that I'm really excited for, and that is The Hill in the Dark Grove, which I believe is a debut for this author. I haven't heard anyone speak about this book. I came across it by pure chance when I was doing a little bit of research to see what was coming out next year. But this sounds really up my alley because this sounds like a really quiet, creeping, rural horror novel that is set in the Welsh countryside and is very heavily inspired by Welsh folklore. So the premise of this novel is that you have this married couple who are the last in a long line of sheep farmers in North Wales. They're kind of down on their luck, they're struggling to get by, and then they, by chance, discover this prehistoric ruin on their land. And Curran, the husband, becomes obsessed with this prehistoric ruin, and this obsession really starts to devolve into something more sinister. And the wife, Rian, realizes that she is in a very isolated place with a man that she no longer really recognizes. And as winter is rolling in, this is becoming more and more of an ominous setup for her to be in. So this sounds like it's going to be, like I said, a really quiet, creeping kind of horror. I really enjoy a rural setting in horror. As much as nature and the countryside is beautiful and peaceful and serene, it can also be very isolated and very creepy and scary in a horror setting as well for those reasons. So I'm really excited about this one. This also is not the only book that is inspired by Welsh mythology that is coming out this year, so I'm really excited about that in particular. Then moving on into February, the first book I want to talk about is The Lies That Summon the Night by Tessonja Odette. That's coming out on the 3rd of February. I've never read from this author before, but as I've said, I'm really moving into my fantasy era right now. And this is a dark romantasy set in a very interesting world where any kind of creative, artistic content has been completely outlawed. So I'm guessing there's no music, there's no visual arts, but there's also no storytelling. And we follow a character who is an illicit teller of fictional stories, who is kind of working in the shadows to get stories out there into the world. But there seems to be some kind of vampiric creatures that have been brought into the world that are, I don't know, I guess in charge of stamping out any kind of artistic freedom. It sounds like a really interesting premise and a really sinister kind of world to explore. I don't know what the take on vampires is going to be in this book, but I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see where this one goes. I hadn't heard of the author at all before I was looking up 2026 releases to make this video, so I don't really have any expectations as to what this book is going to be like, but I've been really enjoying romantasy, so I thought, why not? And then also coming out on the 3rd of February, we have Empire of Madness, Reimagining Western Mental Health Care for Everyone by Khameer, Kidia. And this is the first non-fiction book on this list, and it's kind of re-evaluating how we approach mental health care in the West and how we kind of ignore the impacts of things like slavery, colonialism, homelessness, job instability, all of these things that can have a really negative impact on somebody's mental health. And we focus very much on trying to cure the person of the symptoms rather than looking at more wider societal root causes of mental ill health. So it sounds like a really interesting premise for a non-fiction. I've believed for quite a while that a lot of the decline in mental health in all over the world really is quite significantly tied to poor living conditions in a lot of instances, and they're focusing mental health care in a very individualistic way through like talking therapies and stuff doesn't always get to the root of the problem and may not always be the most impactful thing that we can do for somebody's mental health. I'm really interested to see how much more I can learn about that kind of belief through this nonfiction book. This really sounds like it's up my alley. So as much as I think there is an immense value in medication, in talking therapies and all of that kind of thing, I think there are limitations to how much that type of care can achieve, and I think this book is really going to examine that. Next, a kind of literary magical realist family saga. We have A Beast Slinks Towards Beijing by Alice Evelyn Yang. That comes out on the 19th of February. And this one focuses on a girl whose father has been missing for a decade, having disappeared when she was a teenager. And then one day he reappears on her doorstep and is asking for her. And she is trying to reconcile the fact that she doesn't really recognize this man as he was in her memories. And he is sort of recounting his personal history to her. And I think it is quite a sweeping historical narrative that takes us through the legacy of colonialism in the Asian world. Yeah, I love a bit of magical realism, so this one sounds really interesting, and I've seen a few people online talking about reading arcs of it at the minute, and that's just getting me even more excited to pick this one up. I think I would definitely like to get my hands on some more magical realism. I've loved things like Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Cooper-Smith. I really enjoyed Ruth Ozeki's The Book of Form and Emptiness. I really like seeing where people go with magical realism. I think it's quite an underrated genre in some spaces, so I'm really intrigued to see what this book has to offer. And then a book that I'm sure you've seen a lot of people talk about in similar videos to this, we have And Now Back to You by B.K. Borison, which is the sequel to First Time Caller, which was one of her 2025 releases. I'm so excited for this one. I really loved First Time Caller when I read it earlier this year, and I'm really excited to see more of the kind of side characters from that book and learn more about them and see their romance develop. I think this one is going to be a opposites attract kind of romance where you have whether boy, whether girl, very conflicting personalities forced to work together on a huge assignment. The storm of the century is about to hit. Is it Baltimore where these are set? I want to say it's Baltimore. I feel like all of B.K. Borison's books that I've read are set in Baltimore. That may or may not be true, but the storm of the century is about to hit. These two are forced to work together to cover the story, and they kind of end up overcoming their differences and realizing they have actually got a lot of chemistry, etc., fall in love, all of that good stuff. I've really enjoyed what I've read from B.K. Borison this year, and so I'm really excited to get back into the world of First Time Caller, because that book is just such a gem. Then another author I've never come across before, I'm not sure if this is a debut or not, but coming out on the 26th of February is All We Have Is Time by Amy Tordoff. And this sounds like it's going to really scratch my time travel itch. I don't know if you've seen any of my previous vlogs, but I've talked about how I've really been enjoying time travel narratives in 2025. I really enjoyed The Ministry of Time by Callie Ann Bradley, and I loved The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. And this sounds like it's going to do a similar kind of thing where you have this love story that moves through time. We have an immortal woman who is moving through time and falls for this man that she meets, and then discovers that he actually isn't born for 400 more years, and it's about how their love story moves and develops through time. I've seen people comparing it to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and The Time Traveler's Wife, neither of which I've read, but maybe I should. I definitely want to read more time travel books, or books with a time travel element in them, in 2026. If you've read either of those books, let me know down in the comments if you think they're worth my time, because I'm really into the time travel thing. I don't know what it is. It just really gets me. I just really have a fun time with it whenever I've been reading something that's like time travel related. I don't know, I like books with time travel in them, I guess. Moving into March, we have another contemporary romance with Much Obliged by D.P. Clarence, which is coming out on the 5th of March. This is the third book in the Brent Boys series. I've read the first one, which was The Paper Boys, and it was lovely, so fun, so tender, so cute. I haven't yet read Going Solo, but I definitely want to soon. And then the third one in the book is Much Obliged, which follows a character we get introduced to in the first book, PT, who is a TV producer, and what I've seen the author describing on Instagram as a rugby himbo. The setup of this one is just ticking all of the boxes for me because we have a reality dating show. Now, I'm not somebody who watches dating shows in real life. Like, I'm not interested in Love Island. I've never seen Maths or Love is Blind or any of those shows. I'm like not really interested. But if you give me a book set on a dating show, I eat it up every time. I've loved The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. I loved Cupid Calling by Viano Onyomo. I just love that trope. I don't know what it is. That trope is just so much fun to me. Reading about the kind of goings on behind the scenes of a reality dating show is just a load of fun. And in this one, we have a reality dating show that leads to a kind of fake dating scenario between the producer character and the rugby himbo, who has been christened in the media bisexual Baron Buckford, something like that, I want to say, and is known for being a bit of a rake, and it turns out that isn't really quite accurate, and we follow the relationships that develops between PT and his name is escaping me, between PT and rugby himbo. I really enjoyed Evie Clarence's writing style in The Paperboys. The characterization was really great in that book. I really came to love both of those characters a whole lot, and I'm sure I'm going to do the same for Going Solo and for Much Obliged when it comes out in March. For the next release, we are dipping our toe back into horror. We have Spoiled Milk by Avery Curran, which is coming out on the 12th of March. This is a historical horror that I think is giving me paranormal vibes. We're at this all-girl boarding school in the 1920s, and one of the students mysteriously dies. Two other students, who I think have been kind of rivals, they kind of team up to figure out what's going on, and then I think more students start to die, and there seems to be some kind of strange supernatural curse type element of something going on. Weird things are starting to occur, and all of the students are like running scared, and it just sounds like it's going to be a really fun, creepy, supernatural, paranormal kind of horror, and it sounds like a lot of fun. Following on from this, on the 17th, we have Innamorata, which is the new release from Ava Reid. This is going to be the first book in a duology, and this sounds like it's going to be a kind of gothic fantasy. We have this noble dynasty trying to salvage its future through the betrothal of one of our main characters. I don't know much about it other than that, but on the Waterstones website, it said that it is a gothic fantasy about necromancy, vengeance, and soul-consuming love. And that just sounds right up my alley, to be honest. It sounds like we're going to have quite a dark setting, a kind of crumbling gothic world to explore. So I'm excited for that one. I've not read any Ava Reid before, but I've heard really great things about most of her books. Apart from that Lady Macbeth retelling that everybody seemed to hate. But I've not read any Ava Reid myself, and this one sounds like it could be a good one. Next book is another non-fiction, probably the non-fiction I'm most looking forward to if I had to pick, and that is Chain of Ideas, Great Replacement Theory and the Origins of Our Authoritarian Age by Ibram X. Kendi. I believe is the author of How to Be Anti-Racist, which I haven't read personally, but I've heard amazing things about, and it's one that I've had my eye on for a long time and I've been meaning to pick up. And this sounds like it's going to be another great offering from this author. It comes out on the 19th, and it looks at Great Replacement Theory and how it has kind of developed from this very fringe conspiracy theory that kind of circulated in like the most extreme right-wing circles, and has kind of gained traction to become this more widely spread ideology that has underpinned a lot of what is happening in the Western world with the rise of more right-wing ideologies and right-wing parties across the West. And it looks at how Great Replacement Theory has underpinned a lot of that, and how it has kind of transcended across borders to become this global rallying cry of the right, I suppose. So that sounds fascinating to me. I think it's really important to look at politics from a global standpoint and look at how what is going on in the US, for example, is going to drastically impact things that are happening elsewhere across the world. Like, we don't live in a vacuum, and things that happen beyond our borders are still going to have a massive impact on the politics of our own countries. So I think it's really important to look at things from that wider scope. Honestly, the idea of great replacement theory is something that really interests me as an ideology about like where it's come from, its historical origins, and how it is informing a lot of the politics we're seeing rise in popularity today. So I think that is going to be a really troubling read, but also a very important and insightful read as well. So I'm excited for that one to come out at the end of March. Also then at the end of March, we have Seasons of Glass and Iron by Amal El-Mohtar, which comes out on the 24th of March. This is Amal El-Mohtar's, I believe, debut short story collection. The only thing I've read from Amal El-Mohtar is This Is How You Lose the Time War, which obviously was co-authored by Max Gladstone. I've not read any of their individual works, either authors, but I've heard amazing things about The River Has Roots, which I think came out this year. I haven't gotten around to picking it up, but I do really want to, and so I would love to also get into reading some of Amal El-Mohtar's short story collections as well, because I've heard amazing things about everything that she's written. Next is a very exciting release. We have a horror entry from T. Kingfisher, because this woman is prolific and just has to publish like several books every single year. The first book coming from T. Kingfisher in 2026 is Wolfworm, which is coming out on the 26th of March. I've not read any of T. Kingfisher's horror yet. I've been loving T. Kingfisher this year, and I think she's probably going to be my most read author by the time I get to like wrapping up my reading statistics at the end of the year, because I've read so much from her this year, but I've not read any of her horror yet, not a single bit, and this honestly sounds like it's going to be right up my street. It is a gothic horror set in the late 1800s. We follow a female scientific illustrator who is down on her luck after the death of her father. Her father has been her entry point into the world of work, and after his passing she finds that she's no longer able to get work and she's really struggling when she is granted a position at this kind of gothic manor in rural North Carolina. And she gets there and she is cataloguing and illustrating the collection of insects from this famous scientist, and not everything is as it seems, and there's some dark goings on happening underneath the surface that our main character ends up having to uncover, and the risk that she has possibly put herself at in taking this job. The cover of this one is insane. Also, I love it. I'm really interested to read more horror that takes place in a historical setting, so I'm really excited to pick this one up. I think it sounds like it's going to be a great time. And then the final book for March is another contemporary romance, and that is Hold Me Like a Grudge by Celine, which is coming out on the 31st of March. This one is a sports romance about two professional wrestlers who have this very intense, I nearly said heated rivalry. They have this very intense rivalry that, even though a lot of what goes on in wrestling is performance and is kind of fabricated for the enjoyment of fans, this rivalry is very much real, and these two characters do not get along at all. They have an intense dislike of one another. Except, do they really? Do they really? So yeah, that sounds like it's going to be a fun time. I love a rivals to lovers or enemies to lovers kind of trope, and I've really enjoyed the few sports romances I've read. I feel like I've only read The Prospects by Katie Hoffman. That is the only book that is coming to mind as a sports romance that I've read, but I loved that one, so I'm definitely keen to check out more. On the 2nd of April, we have our second book inspired by Welsh folklore, and that is Honeysuckle by Bar Fridman-Tell. This one sounds like such a unique premise. It's been described as a feminist Frankenstein with flowers, and I love that description so much. This follows a lonely young boy whose sister builds for him a companion out of flowers, but unfortunately, given that she's made of flowers, she is a seasonal creature and needs to be recreated on a regular basis. And when his sister fails to return to rebuild his companion one year, the boy takes it upon himself to recreate her, and I guess we go into this kind of obsessive Frankenstein-esque place with that. And honestly, this is just such a creative concept, and I'm really excited to see so many books coming out that are inspired by Welsh mythology. That's just really exciting to me. So I definitely want to be checking this one out. Next book is another book that sounds like it's going to be a historical leaning horror, and that is Odessa by Gabrielle Sher. And this is a book that is set in historical Russia at the height of the pogroms, and we follow this family who are grief-stricken after the passing of their daughter, and her father turns to ancient magic in order to try and bring her back from the grave, and he is successful, but she comes back a little bit different. And I love anything to do with kind of necromancy, bringing things back from the dead. That's just such a fun and dark premise to explore in a novel. I really enjoy historical setting as well, so I want to read more kind of historical horrors. So between Wolfworm and this, I think it's going to be a great year for me to get into that genre. The next book is very, very exciting. This, I believe, is Cat Sebastian's first sort of foray into contemporary romance, and that is Starshipped, which is coming out on the 23rd. And I have been obsessed with the premise of this ever since I heard about it, ever since I saw Cat Sebastian posting about it online. We have two rival co-stars who are kind of enemies to lovers, and they are both co-stars on this popular long-running sci-fi show, and I just think that's such a great premise. I love anything that has a kind of TV show setting, and Cat Sebastian is just such a fantastic writer of romance. Her historical romances have been some of my favourites that I've ever read, so I'm really excited to see her move into the contemporary and to see what she does with that premise. I think it sounds really, really fun. I love a rivals to lovers story, like I said, and I think this one is going to be a banger. So very, very pleased to see a new Cat Sebastian coming out in 2026. And for the end of the month, we have a new release from KJ Charles, How to Fake It in Society. That book is coming out on the 30th. And this one is, I believe, a Regency era romance following a shopkeeper who suddenly comes into wealth and all of the trials and tribulations that come along with that. It seems like we are going to have this character who is thrust into society and another character who is down on his luck and is maybe trying to take advantage of somebody who is maybe a bit naive to the machinations of wealth and society in Regency London. So yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. KJ Charles's Regency books haven't been my favourite. This is probably a controversial opinion, but my favourite books from her are the Will Darling series. But I'll eat up anything that KJ Charles writes. I'll take whatever. I'll take whatever she gives us. So I'll definitely be checking this one out when it comes out at the end of April. The only entry that I have for May is Aphrodisia, Women, Sex and Pleasure in the Classical World. Jean is a classical historian and a YouTuber that I've watched for a long time, but I've never picked up any of her books, which is a massive shame really, because I've enjoyed her content for a long time. This book is a look at what female desire looked like in antiquity, because a lot of the literature that we have about sex and sexual desire from that time period focuses on men and the behaviour and actions of men. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun to flip that on its head and take a look at what sexuality looked like for women of the time period. Jean is so knowledgeable about her subject, and I'm really excited to finally pick up a book from her, because she's published a lot actually the last few years. She's published so much, and I have never picked up one of her books, but this one sounds like it's going to be right up my street, so I would love to pick that one up. In June, we have another contemporary romance, but with a bit of a fantastical spin, and that is Dearly Departed by Chip Pons. I haven't read Chip Pons' first book, Winging It With You, I want to say it's called, but I've heard fantastic things about it, and so I do really want to check this author out, and this premise sounds like so much fun. We are following Hayden, who is actually Hades, who has been sort of cast out of the immortal world and has had his godhood stripped from him, and now he is living as a funeral director and desperately trying to work out how he can bend the rules to get back to the realm of the gods, basically. This one sounds like it's going to be a Grump Sunshine kind of romance, because he butts heads with the sunshiny golden retriever energy florist Levi Wilder, And I just love that premise. I love a book that is set in the contemporary world but with like fantastical elements. Think things like the nursery crimes books by Jasper Fforde. Anything that is set in like our contemporary world but like mythology or folklore is real, and is like working as an undercurrent that maybe people don't know about in society. That's just such a fun premise to me. Then in July, we obviously have the final volume of Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. That is set to come out on the 2nd of July. I have a bit of a weird relationship with Heartstopper. I've loved it like everybody else, and I've really enjoyed seeing the relationship develop between Nick and Charlie. I've enjoyed watching the show, but I'm kind of at a point now where I'm a bit over it. I still think the books are wonderful and I would highly recommend them, but I just don't know if I'm in the mood to carry on reading a lot of YA. So I may not end up buying this one, but I may see if it comes to my local library, because I would like to see how Nick and Charlie's relationship winds up as they are moving towards going to university. So, you know, this one I probably will check out, but I'm maybe not as excited about it as I would have been a few years ago when I first got into the series. So, the other release in July that I'm really intrigued by is Venus Vanishing by Rebecca Birrell, and that comes out on the 9th. This is another queer historical book where we are following this young runaway who embarks on this affair with the wife of a very powerful man in 1920s Berlin. And it sounds as if it is kind of chronicling the changing times in 1920s and early 1930s Germany with the rise of the Nazi Party and what that meant for queer people in this kind of thriving hub of queerness that Berlin was in the 1920s, and how that all kind of comes tumbling down. So that sounds like it's going to be a really difficult book to read, but it's something that I find really interesting, learning about sort of the Weimar Republic and the hub of queer life that Berlin was at that time and how that all changed so drastically. So I definitely want to keep an eye out for this one. I believe this is a debut, so nothing out from this author previously, but this premise really does a lot for me. I'm really keen to pick this one up. Then in August we have the book that I'm probably the most excited about from this entire list, and that is Daggerbound by T. Kingfisher. This is her second book that's coming out in 2026, and this is the sequel to Sword Heart. I haven't read Sword Heart. I'm familiar with the premise of Sword Heart, which is that this young woman becomes tied up in this immortal warrior who has been cursed to inhabit this sword, and when she picks up the sword, she and this warrior kind of become intertwined, and I think it's a love story between the two. I didn't know that this was set in the world of the White Rat, like the Saint of Steel series and the Clocktor War duology, but Daggerbound is about Leonard Edmund from Clockwork Boys, and I loved Leonard Edmund's arc in that duology so much. And this is the same premise. We have Leonard Edmund, who is kind of disillusioned in his life as a scholar. He spends most of his life just ferrying artifacts around from temple to temple, and when he is set upon by bandits on the road, he breaks the cardinal rule, grabs the relic, which is an ancient sword, and lo and behold, it is inhabited by an ancient immortal warrior. And it's a queer romance. It's a Leonard Edmund romance in the world of the White Rat. I absolutely cannot wait. I screamed when I found out what this book was about, and I cannot wait. I'll obviously have to read Sword Heart first, which I was planning to do probably in 2026 anyway, but I am so hyped for Daggerbound. You have no idea how badly I want to read another book about Leonard Edmund, so I am gassed that this is coming out in 2026. I only wish it was sooner, because it isn't coming out until the 25th of August, but that isn't far away from my birthday, so what a treat for me. The final book I have to talk to you about is Freya Marsk's newest release, which was recently announced, and that is Bodies of Magic, which is coming on the 15th of September. And this is another shift for Freya Marsk. This is a dark academia book. You have this really prestigious school for magical healers, and every year students get grouped together and put into these trials, and they have to work together to pass the trials to get through their studies. And we follow a group of students who, at the very beginning of their trials, discover that one of their teammates has died, and they have to kind of unravel the mystery of what's happened there. A very different shift away from the previous things I've read from Freya Mask, the Last Binding Trilogy and Swordcross. I haven't yet read Cinder House, but I do have it, and I do want to try and read it before the end of 2025. So a move away from what I'm used to from Freya Mask, but I love her writing and her characterization so much that I will read anything that she publishes. So I am so happy that we're getting a new Freya Mask in 2026. And there you have it. That is the end of my list. So many exciting things coming out in 2026. I think it's going to be a great year for reading. I'm still very, very much in my fantasy hype right now, as you can probably tell. And there's some great fantastical books coming out, as well as a lot of horror, a lot of dark academia, some really compelling non-fiction. Overall, I think this is a really fun and varied list of things. There's probably so many more books coming out that I haven't even come across yet that are going to be amazing. So yeah, I can't wait to read more books in 2026. Let me know what you're excited for in 2026. Will you be picking up any of these books? Are there any other books that you think I need to check out in the next reading year? Let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear from you. I will see you in my next video, but until then, stay safe and happy reading.